We'll be there. Thank you, guys. On a new week, on a Monday, Fox News alert because the anger is spilling over in Washington, D.C.
On you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
There were hundreds of veterans tearing down the barricades of the World War II Memorial, with protesters then carrying those gates all the way to the White House. They stacked them up one on top of the other. Lawmakers taking a step back, meanwhile, toward a deal on the nation's spending. Many folks thought they had it together on Saturday. Here we are on Monday morning, and the resolution is not at hand. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome to America's Newsroom. Hope you had a terrific weekend.
Hey, Bill. Yep. I did. I hope you did, too. Good morning, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. So for a while, things looked pretty promising in these negotiations over the weekend. But then, you know, Washington, they stepped in, took care of that. Watch this.
So I think we're in a status quo. I do think we will see our way through this, but the last 24 hours have not been good.
Leadership must lead, and basically we're in a crisis mode right now. We should not be here. There's no way it's acceptable for this government to be shut down. This is self-inflicted pain on millions of people. It's unnecessary.
Maybe so, but everybody wants their pound of flesh in this deal, and the Senate Democrats are the ones playing hardball right now. They're saying no deal unless Republicans agree to actually higher levels of government spending.
See if that idea goes anywhere. Team Fox coverage now. Peter Ducey on the protests in Washington and across the country, but we start with Stuart Varney of Varney and Company. Stuart, good morning to you.
Morning, Bill.
What do Democrats want?
They want to reverse or restructure those sequester cuts. Those were across-the-board spending cuts in the federal budget imposed earlier this year as the direct result of an earlier standoff. The Democrats don't like those cuts. They want them ended, or as I said, restructured. They want to spend more money. And that is the new sticking point in this argument over how much do we spend in the future.
So this just came up in the last 48 hours. Interesting strategy. 3 days until the so-called debt limit is reached. How is the market reacting, and what do you expect in 28 minutes, Stuart?
I'm going to say that the Dow Industrial Average will be down about 100 points at the opening bell in 20 minutes' time. That is not a catastrophe. That is not a market tanking. That is a fairly muted response from Wall Street because of this stalemate. The point is, the stalemate is over future spending, not really about future borrowing. That's the time frame. That's the deadline of Wednesday evening, October the 16th. We go into Thursday with no deal on debt. That would be something that Wall Street really would pay much closer attention to. So to sum it up, Bill, a muted response 20 minutes from now, but still a Dow down 100.
That's right. And the politicians listen to markets. You watch that this week, too.
Oh, yes. That would put pressure to get a deal on the debt.
We've seen it before. Thank you,
Yes.
Stuart. See you at 9:20 on the Fox Business Network. Thank you, my friend. Martha.
Well, are these new demands from the Democrats too much? Tell us what you think. Send us a tweet at Martha McCallum or at Bill Hemmer. Tennessee Republican Bob Corker has been one of those lawmakers most eager to make a deal. You saw him on with Chris Wallace over the weekend. We're going to talk to you about where he thinks things are today in what is being called a really crucial day in this whole thing. A lot of high hopes for today. So
that's right.
That's
meanwhile, the Senate already rejecting a plan brought by Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine that could have ended this whole mess. And even though it did not fly, Senator Collins says it is still a good first step.
I certainly didn't expect that the plan that I've been developing with my colleagues is anything that's set in stone, and we continue to work to modify it, to broaden support. But I wouldn't be surprised if elements of it form the basis for the compromise that finally brings this impasse to an end.
Looks kind of lonely in that big hall, doesn't it? Her plan would have funded the government for 6 months, extended the debt limit through January of next year.
Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham raising some new concerns about his chamber passing a budget and a debt ceiling deal that the majority of the House GOP won't support, putting Speaker John Boehner perhaps at risk. Watch.
If you want to go on offense, it has to come from the House. And the last thing I want to see happen is a bad bill past the Senate that goes to the House where a majority of Democrats vote for it and a minority of Republicans vote for it, putting John Boehner's speakership at risk. Nobody in the country should want to lose John Boehner as Speaker.
Graham going on to say that he will not vote for any plan that he thinks can't get a majority of the Republicans in the House. And let's go back to these protests that happened over the weekend in Washington. Thousands of veterans pushing past the metal barricades, carrying them as they marched in some instances. Really dramatic images came out of this. To see veterans marching toward the White House in protest and in complaint. Very, very dramatic. Peter Ducey is on this for us live in Washington this morning. So, Peter, what was the scene really like down there yesterday?
Martha, the crowd there at the World War II Memorial was very enthusiastic, but they were also very upset. When those barricades were broken apart first thing in the morning, the only visible Park Police presence we could see just stayed across the street and watched as those barricades were piled high outside the memorial. Now, veterans participating were from across the country. A few even slept in their cars on the mall Saturday night, and there was some concern from veterans about their own benefits being cut during the shutdown. However, most of the thought was being given to vets who couldn't be there and their families.
There is no place to go past America. They shut these things down, and if the veterans are quiet, the last bastion of Americanism that this country has. This place goes to the ash heap of history. Do not let that happen. It rests on you. Civil disobedience, no violence. Do it right, do it smart.
These are open air memorials, very little cost, if any, to the federal government. And these are for our honored war dead. And we're just not going to stand by and let this happen.
And here in D.C., from the World War II Memorial, some protesters walked west to the Lincoln Memorial to remove barricades there, and others marched up 17th Street to the White House. Most were participating, Martha, for most of the day.
That first speaker, Ben Smith, is a former Navy SEAL, very powerful speaker out there rallying folks. So there were also protests outside of the one that we see here that were connected to this one across the country, right, Peter?
Right, and the organizers called this a Million Vet March because they wanted people across the country to go to their local war memorials, like in Gettysburg, to demonstrate their opposition to the way the shutdown government has treated the military. Other places we saw protests: Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, also in Pennsylvania at Valley Forge.
I feel like this is like the Boston Tea Party all over again, but in Valley Forge Park.
People died and shed blood here hundreds of years ago to keep something like this. Now they want to keep, the government wants to keep everybody out.
And a vet in D.C. reminded me, Martha, that memorials are where the living go to talk to the dead, and if there are barricades around a memorial, they see that as the government trying to keep them from paying respects to their fallen friends.
Really bad situation, and you got to love the jogger. Really costs the government a lot when someone goes for a run through a national park. They ticketed $100 for jogging in a national park. It's just incredible. Peter, thank you. We'll see you later.
Still, we find a number of states now digging into their own budgets to reopen some of our most famous landmarks. Statue of Liberty now open to visitors yet again. New York, not the only state doing this, though. Tourists are also able to go back to the Grand Canyon in Arizona after that state cut a deal to pay for it on its own. Here is the governor of Arizona. That's Jan Brewer.
This Arizona landmark attraction draws millions of visitors every year, and I just refuse to let wrong-headed federal policy deprive tourists worldwide the opportunity to see this magnificent landscape.
Well, Governor Brewer also says that Arizona will use local money as well as private donations to keep the canyon open, but will reassess if the shutdown continues. So they got creative in New York and they got creative in Arizona. Yep. I think they got creative in Utah as well, so we'll add them up for you throughout the week here.
No jogging. Very expensive.
Can't do it.
Don't be doing that.